Do a quick video of the brew in the bag process. I'm going to brew the kit that I got from the malt miller, which is the Dennis King Galaxy Delight. I want to show you roughly what you need for this brew in the bag process. There are other brewing methods, I'll discuss that in a little bit, but for today we're concentrating on brewing the bag. So behind me, which you can't actually see because it's wrapped up, is a Buffalo 40 litre electric boiler. Inside that is a grain bag that fits perfectly around the pot and allows you to drape it over the sides. Again, you can also get them from Malt Miller now, you start selling them. We're going to need our kit, which has been put into there and stirred in. We'll get onto that process in a part. I recommend a spoon, plastic spoon for stirring the mash in. The paddles are probably better because of the holes, because you want to make sure you get all the lumps out. You're going to need a hydrometer and a tube to test your alcohol. A thermometer, I recommend, or at least two, or make sure that one that you have got is calibrated properly and it's reading the right temperature. Sanitizer for sanitising at the end. Anything pre-boil, I wouldn't really worry about sanitising too much as long as it's clean and been cleaned from previous time. The real sanitisation wants to come in at the end when you've got your fermenter and you're putting everything prior to fermenting. Big jug is a good one. Unless you know exactly where to finish on the boiler, which you probably will do after the first couple of times, a jug to get all the water into that, or a hose connected to the sink, or if you're outside, just hose straight in. That's an essential. You're going to need a fermenter, something to ferment in, anything, plastic, stainless, anything that you can put an airlock, blow off tube into and ferment in cleanly. Then you're also going to need a rack or some sort of draining device. When you pull that bag, a lot of people use pulleys and things like that, which are great. I don't have that facility in the flat. It's probably going to be quite a challenge to pull that bag out with 5 kilos of grain in. I'm going to put that over the bucket. This is the wife's cooking rack. I hope it doesn't bend and break because I'll be in trouble, but there are, you can get something equivalent. Put that over your bucket, bag on top, allow the water to drain back through from the bag. And then your other piece of equipment is the wort chiller, which is going to chill the wort down from its boiling temperature right down to pitching temperature before we put our yeast in. This, another part of the essential kit. That's pretty much all you need. I would say scales as well for weighing out your hops. Another thing, make sure that they're accurate. And for me personally, for the Buffalo boiler, it's prone to scorching on the bottom, on the element. You get a build up of crust during the boil. And I bought a big metal spoon, and what I do once the boil's going, if it does kind of cut out, I gently kind of agitate that wort on the bottom of the boil plate, not trying to gouge the element, but just enough to kind of agitate it off a little bit, and the boil tends to kick back in. The Buffalo boilers are known for problematic. Some people have had some where they've gone with 50, 60 all grains, never had troubles. You get problems with the cutouts and the thermal switch. This has been alright for, I'll probably jinx it now, it's been alright for about 6 brews so far, but I find the spoon for that really does help. Other than that, that is really all you need to kind of get brewing. I'm going to cover a little bit about what else you need, just because I see some people, it can be quite daunting when you do your first all grain, and for me, I'm switching to brewing the bag at the moment because in a flat I'm limited on space. I don't have space for mash tuns and varying other bits of equipment. I have done it in the flat, and it's problematic when you've got children and a family. You want to sort of be as compact and have as less equipment as possible for me to kind of make the brew day a little bit quicker and a little bit easier. Also, it means kind of you can get it out on a whim. Kind of, you ain't got to set up too much. So, firstly, you're going to need your kit, which is I think the simplest way when you're doing your first all grain. This is the Malt Miller Dennis King Galaxy Delight kit. It's got everything you need, all your grains in the kit. Your hops come in a separate bag, and your yeast. So this is all added in to the boiler. So now with this, we've done a full mash brew in the bag. And what that means is all the water's been added at the start for the whole duration of the brewing process. We don't add in extra water, we're not sparging. Well, I'm not. I know some people do, but I'm not sparging with this. So everything's been added at the start. There are other variations of brew in the bag. There's like a mini brew in the bag where you're doing mini batches. There's maxi brew in the bag where you can have a smaller pot and you can sparge to get your volume up, and you can also add water back post boil. So you'd start or finish rather with a higher gravity beer and dilute back with water to bring you back to your final gravity that you need to be at. Which is also another great way of, if you're limited on space or you don't have room for the bigger boiler, you can have, brew in a bag allows you to brew, anyone can do it, I think, in any space. You know, you can have a tiny kitchen anywhere. It allows you a lot more scope. The other thing I think is a bit of brewing software is another thing to have. When you get these kits, a lot of people seem confused about how much water you need and the time stab things. I think with the water, there's one thing to factor in. It's when you're doing the full mash, is how much your pot boils off during the boil, and how much it will retain in the boil pot once it's finished, which is your dead space. You could boil up a full volume, see what your loss is, put a amount in, boil for an hour and see what your loss is over an hour, write that down. Also drain the boiler, allow it to drain and see what's left in the boiler, and that will give you your dead space. Once you've got those two volumes, that allows you to kind of work out on some brewing software the amount of water you need to start with, that once you finish you end up with the 23 litres in your fermenter. So for me personally, excuse me, is I've started with 35 litres in here, which was kind of a little bit scary because it's quite near its kind of limits. Even though it's a 40 litre boiler, it seems like it's right up the top. So I read on a forum that the thing to do would be to take 2 litres out once you've at your strike temperature, which will allow you to kind of put a little bit back in should you need to, and once you've added your grain, should you need to kind of pull that bit back. So you kind of need those two measurements before you start boiling to kind of work out how much water you need to start with. It will vary on varying equipment, but other than that, the instructions you get on the kit are pretty much what you need. You mash for 90 minutes, so once your water is up to temperature, you probably get your temperature up to say 70 degrees, depending on your software and your grain temperature. That allows, once you've added the grain, for the temperature to be at the actual mashing temperature. So you'd start with roughly 70, the grain would go in, it would probably drop to around 66, 65. Then you need to hold that temperature for the duration of the mash, which is either 60 or 90 minutes. It's 90 minutes in this case. I've wrapped it up in a sleeping bag, it's got a camping mat around it as well, and that should retain the temperature. After that, you're going to take the bag out for this process anyway, and then put it in the bucket with the mesh on the top, allow it to drain through, and then crank your boiler up and allow it to get up to boil temperature. Then on your kit, it tells you that you've got 15 grams of Galaxy for 90 minutes. That's going to be your first addition. So once your boil's at, and you can see it bubbling away, chuck that in, and that boils for the duration of the 90 minutes. Then at the last 15 minutes, before the time's up, you add 45 grams of hops, and that's it for the boil. It's done. Then after that, all we're going to do is add our wort chiller, connect it to the cold feed of the tap, and allow it to run through and chill that wort down. Then after that, we're going to sanitise our fermenting vessel. This is where it's really important to make sure that it is sanitised. Anything pre-boil you can get away with as long as it's clean, but after boil you want it to be scrupulously clean and sanitised. Make sure that it's really clean. Then with this particular recipe, we're going to ferment at 20 degrees. You want to keep it somewhere where it's stable. I mean, not everyone's got a fermenting fridge, but somewhere that's stable around that 20 degree mark. And as your first one, I would just add the yeast dry. I mean, some packets say to rehydrate them. You can do that, and just not complicate your first recipe, I would say. And then after that, we're going to dry hop. And our dry hopping I tend to do after the initial fermentation. And depending on the yeast, it could be 2 or 3 days, could be a week. Otherwise, putting the dry hop in too soon, you'll drive off all the flavours you're going to get from the aroma you're going to get from the hop through the fermentation. So that's pretty much the basic of it. It doesn't need to be more complicated than it is. I think some people get the kit and there's not enough instruction, but there is. I recommend going online, looking at a few videos, reading a couple of articles, but don't read too much, because too much information sometimes can be conflicting, you can get confused, and before you know it, you're getting stressed out. So I think that's basically everything you need to do full mash brew in the bag. The one other thing I think is time. You've got to allow yourself some time, maybe a time when no one else is around, to allow yourself, just to relax and enjoy it. And best thing I would say is to note everything down when you're doing it. Obviously you've got your losses and that, but you can note that down again at the end, just to sort of refer back in case they've changed once the grains are in, if the temperature held. Writing everything down is key to when you go back to brewing again. If any mistakes do happen along the way, you can refer back to them to see why they happened and how you can adjust for it next time. I think that's, you know, an essential part of getting things right. Right, so we've just lifted the bag. I found out that it was actually easier to put the baking tray or the cooking rack, if you like, on top of the boiler rather than try and move the bucket. Did have a little bit of spillage. Be prepared for that. Try and gather the bag up as much as you can when you're about to put it out. If you've got some gloves or rubber gloves or washing up gloves just in case it's a little bit hot, then allow it to drain. This is the time you want to get the boiler on the go now while that's draining in, just to get it up to temperature for the boil. I might just let that set on there for a while. It's working pretty well. So just make sure that it's strong enough that it's not going to concave and go straight into the boil pot. That's something you don't want to happen. Next, I'm going to show you how I'm going to get rid of all the steam in a minute. So I'll cut back to that. Right. So in the next part of the brewing process, I've pulled the bag totally off the boil pot now. Put the lid on just to get it up to boil. It's now up to boil. We don't want to leave the lid on while it's boiling because of DMS and other problems. The first addition of hops have gone in, which was the 15 grams. I've got the grain bag on like a strainer just over a fermenting vessel with just to sort of gather any last little bits that are going to fall out. And brewing in the flat, I'm a bit worried about steam. I couldn't put it on my hob above the extractor fan because of the space and the wire on the boil pot. So what I've done is, I've seen a lot of home brewers do, is have something just above the same sort of height as the boil pot and a fan. So it's blowing all the steam straight out of an open window, which hopefully should avoid any kind of like nasty water stuck to the ceiling. I've heard some horror stories and that. I certainly don't want that to happen because I'll be in trouble, I think. I took a gravity, well I haven't took gravity, I took a sample of pre-boil so we can do a pre-boil gravity. I'll explain this at the end of the video. It's more for sort of working out the efficiency of your boil and that, but for your first brew I really wouldn't worry. I'd concentrate on your end gravity, your starting gravity and your final gravity, but you can take that, so it's worth noting. Right, so the last 15 minutes of the boil, the hops have gone in and the wort chiller's gone in as well, just to sanitize it. Once that's finished, we're going to run the water through it, chill it down, add it to the fermenter, ready to pitch the yeast. Right, so the wort's chilling down, or the beer rather is chilling down now. Another little tip, when you're running your wort chiller, you're going to get a lot of hot water coming out. What you want to do is collect some of that in a bucket, keep it to one side, and then when you do your washing up of your boil pot, you've got some nice hot water to wash your boil pot with, which means you don't waste more hot water washing it up, and you can reuse the water you've got. Also, you can fill the sink up. I've just done the dishes with that bit. Or even if you've got a washer dryer, I think some people in America run them straight into their washer dryers till they've got the extra water. Why waste it?